The sun hung heavy over the village of Calabar like a golden calabash, pouring heat onto the red earth below. Okonkwo wiped his brow and surveyed his yam fields with the pride of a king admiring his kingdom. Rows upon rows of healthy yam mounds stretched before him, each one promising wealth beyond his father's wildest dreams. "This harvest will make me the richest man in 3 villages," he muttered to himself, running his calloused fingers over the broad leaves. "Even Chief Adeyemi will bow his head in respect when he sees what I have accomplished." Behind him, in their modest compound, his wife Amara leaned against the clay wall of their hut, one hand pressed against her swollen belly, the other gripping the doorframe. The baby had been kicking all morning, harder than usual, and a dull ache had settled deep in her lower back. She was 9 months pregnant, and the child seemed eager to enter the world. "Okonkwo," she called out, her voice strained. "Please come. Something feels different today." Okonkwo didn't turn around. "Not now, woman. Can you not see I am working? These yams will not harvest themselves. The rains are coming soon, and if I do not finish before the first storm, everything will rot in the ground." Amara bit her lip, tasting the salt of tears she refused to shed. This was not the man she had married 5 years ago. That man had been kind, with laughter in his eyes and promises on his lips. But as his farms prospered and his barns filled with grain, something had hardened inside him. His heart had become like sun-baked clay, beautiful to look at, but impossible to penetrate. "The baby," she tried again, her voice cracking. "I think the baby is coming." "Then go to your mother's house," Okonkwo said dismissively, still not looking at her. "Women have been giving birth since the beginning of time. You do not need me to hold your hand like a child. I have important work to do." Amara's mother had died 2 years earlier, taken by a fever that swept through the village like an evil wind. Okonkwo knew this. Everyone knew this. But he had spoken without thinking, or perhaps he simply did not care enough to remember. A sharp pain tore through Amara's belly, so intense that she gasped and nearly fell. Her water broke, soaking the ground beneath her feet. This was no false alarm. The baby was coming and coming fast. "Okonkwo," she screamed. "Please. I need the midwife. Mama, Nkechi. You must fetch her and pay her fee." Now Okonkwo turned, irritation carved into every line of his face. He saw his wife clutching her stomach, saw the puddle at her feet, and his frown deepened. "Mama Nkechi charges 3 full baskets of yams for a delivery," he said coldly. 3 baskets. That is highway robbery. For what? To catch a baby that would come out anyway? No. I will not waste my harvest on such foolishness. Amara stared at her husband, as if seeing him for the first time. "You would let me suffer? Let your child die? For yams?" "Stop being dramatic," Okonkwo snapped. "Go to the stream and call for the village women. They will help you for free. I am not paying Mom Nkechi's greedy price when I have a harvest to complete. This rain will come tomorrow or the next day. Every moment I waste is money lost." Another contraction seized Amara, this one bringing her to her knees. She cried out, a sound so full of pain and betrayal that even the birds in the nearby trees fell silent. But Okonkwo had already turned back to his precious yam fields, his mind calculating profits and storage, blind to everything else. Amara knew then that she was alone, completely alone. Using the wall for support, she pulled herself upright and began the agonizing walk toward the village square. Each step was torture. The contractions came faster now, like waves crashing against the shore during a storm. Sweat poured down her face, mixing with tears of pain and humiliation. "Help!" she called out weakly as she stumbled past the compound of her neighbor, Adana. "Please, someone help me." Adana rushed out, her eyes widening in horror at the sight of Amara doubled over and clutching her belly. "Your husband," Adana exclaimed. "Where is Okonkwo? Why are you alone?" "In the fields," Amara gasped. "He refuses to leave. He refuses to pay for Mama Nkechi." Adana's face darkened with anger, but there was no time for scolding. "Come, sister. Lean on me. We will get you to Mama Nkechi's hut." Let that wicked man answer to the ancestors for his cruelty." Together, they made the slow, painful journey to the midwife's dwelling at the edge of the village. Mama Nkechi, a woman of 60 years with hands that had delivered half the children in Calabar, took one look at Amara and knew this would be a difficult birth. "Bring her inside quickly," Mama Nkechi commanded. "This baby is in distress." "Mama Nkechi," Adana said hesitantly, "Okonkwo refuses to pay your fee. He says he must save his yams for the harvest." The midwife's eyes flashed with an emotion that was hard to read. Anger, yes, but also something deeper. Something ancient. "Then we will deliver this child without his blessing," Mama Nkechi said quietly. "But mark my words, a man who values crops over his own blood will harvest only bitterness in the end. Bring her in. The ancestors are watching, and they forget nothing." As Amara was helped onto the birthing mat, her screams echoed across the village, reaching even the distant fields where Okonkwo worked. He paused for just a moment, his hands stilling on a yam vine. Then he shook his head and continued his work, telling himself that women always exaggerated their pain. He had no idea that this day would mark the beginning of his downfall, or that the woman crying out in agony would one day hold his entire future in her hands. The labor lasted 16 hours. 16 hours of agony that pushed Amara to the very edge of death. Mama Nkechi worked with the skill of a woman who had seen hundreds of births, but even she worried as she watched Amara's strength fading with each passing hour. "Push, daughter," Mama Nkechi urged, her voice steady despite her concern. "Your baby needs you to be strong. Just a little more." Amara had no strength left. Her body was drenched in sweat, her voice hoarse from screaming. The world swam in and out of focus, and she could hear whispers that seemed to come from far away, the voices of her ancestors, perhaps, calling her to join them. "I cannot," she whispered. "I am too tired. Let me rest. Let me sleep." "No." Mama Nkechi's sharp command cut through the fog. "You will not leave this child without a mother. Your husband may have abandoned you, but I will not. Now push." With a final burst of strength she didn't know she possessed, Amara pushed. And then, like the first rain after a long drought, a baby's cry filled the air. "A girl," Mama Nkechi announced, her weathered face breaking into a smile. "A beautiful, strong girl." She placed the tiny, wriggling infant on Amara's chest. Amara looked down at her daughter, at the tiny fists waving in the air, at the small mouth opened in protest of being thrust into this bright, harsh world, and something shifted inside her. This was love, pure and fierce and unconditional. This was what mattered. Not yams. Not wealth. Not status. This small, perfect human being. "Zainab," Amara whispered, naming her daughter after her own mother. "I will call you Zainab, and I promise you, my child, you will never know the cruelty of abandonment. You will never wonder if you are valued. You will grow up knowing you are worth more than all the yams in all the fields in all the world." Mama Nkechi cleaned the baby and tended to Amara, who was weak but alive. As dawn broke over the village, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Adana brought news. "Okonkwo is still in the fields," she reported, disgust evident in her voice. "He worked through the entire night. He has not even asked about you or the baby." Mama Nkechi shook her head slowly. "Let him have his harvest. There are some lessons a man can only learn through suffering. The ancestors have a long memory, and the earth keeps perfect accounts." 3 days passed before Okonkwo finally came to Mama Nkechi's hut. His harvest was complete, his yams safely stored in his barns. He arrived with an air of satisfaction, expecting to collect his wife and child like one might collect tools left at a neighbor's house. "I have come for Amara," he announced from the doorway, not bothering to ask about their well-being. Mama Nkechi stepped outside, her small frame somehow imposing in the morning light. "Have you come to pay the fee for my services?" Okonkwo's face hardened. "I told you I would not pay. You chose to help her without my consent. That is not my debt." "I see," Mama Nkechi said softly. "Then let me tell you something, Okonkwo, son of Yuzo. I have delivered babies in this village for 40 years. I have seen wealthy men and poor men, kind men and cruel men. But never, never have I seen a man so proud that he would let his wife suffer alone for the sake of yams. My business is my own, Okonkwo retorted. Now bring my wife out. She has rested enough. Your wife nearly died, Mama Nkechi said, her voice rising. She bled so much I thought the ancestors would claim her. Your daughter was stuck in the birth canal for hours. But you knew none of this because you were fondling your yams while your family fought for life. For the first time, a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, or fear, crossed Okonkwo's face. She is alive, is she not? The child too? So what is the problem? Mama Nkechi stepped closer, her eyes boring into his. The problem, foolish man, is that you have planted seeds of bitterness that will grow into a harvest of sorrow. Mark my words, the day will come when you will need compassion, and you will find none. The day will come when you will beg for help, and you will remember this moment. Okonkwo laughed, though it sounded hollow. Old woman, you speak in riddles. I am young and strong and wealthy. I need no one's compassion. We shall see, Mama Nkechi said. We shall see. Amara emerged from the hut, moving slowly, with baby Zainab wrapped in cloth against her chest. She looked at Okonkwo, and he was startled by what he saw in her eyes. Not love, not even anger, just a cold, flat emptiness, as if she were looking at a stranger. I am ready, she said quietly. They walked back to their compound in silence. Okonkwo went immediately to his barns to count his yams, already thinking about market prices. He didn't notice that Amara didn't go into their hut. Instead, she sat outside under the shade of the irako tree and stared at the horizon, holding her daughter close. Something had broken inside her during those 16 hours of labor. The woman who had loved Okonkwo, who had believed in him, who had made excuses for his growing coldness, that woman had died on Mama Nkechi's birthing mat. The woman who emerged was different, harder, clearer. And she made a silent promise to herself and to her daughter. Never again would she allow herself to be powerless. Never again would she depend on a man who valued possessions more than people. She didn't know how yet, but she would find a way to stand on her own. The ancestors, watching from the realm beyond, smiled. Amara's true journey was just beginning. 5 years passed like water flowing down a river, sometimes slow, sometimes fast, but always moving forward. Little Zainab grew into a bright, curious child with her mother's gentle eyes and a spirit that seemed unbreakable despite the coldness of her father. Okonkwo's wealth had indeed increased. His yam barns were the fullest in 3 villages, and he had purchased 2 more parcels of land. Other farmers came to him for advice, and he gave it freely, basking in their admiration. In the village square, men nodded respectfully when he passed. But in his own compound, a different story unfolded. He barely spoke to Amara except to make demands. He ignored Zainab completely, angry that his firstborn was not a son. He took a second wife, Obioma, a young woman barely 20 years old, hoping she would give him the male heir he craved. Amara he treated like a servant, useful for cooking and cleaning but unworthy of respect or affection. But what Okonkwo didn't see, because he never truly looked, was how Amara was changing. It started small. One of the village women, Chinyu, fell ill with a fever and couldn't care for her children. Amara offered to help, cooking meals and washing clothes. In gratitude, Chinyu taught Amara the art of a dyer, the traditional cloth dyeing technique that had been passed down through her family for generations. Amara had always been creative, and she took to the work like a bird takes to the sky. Her patterns were unique, blending traditional symbols with new designs that told stories. She dyed cloths in deep indigos and rich browns, creating pieces so beautiful that women began asking where Chinyu had purchased them. These are not mine, Chinyu would say with pride. These are Amara's creations. She has the hands of an artist and the vision of a prophet. Word spread. Slowly at first, then faster. Women from neighboring villages began traveling to Calabar specifically to purchase Amara's dyer cloths. She sold them for modest prices, saving every cowrie shell in a clay pot she buried beneath the irako tree. Okonkwo noticed none of this. He was too busy acquiring more land, more yams, more status. When he saw Amara working with dyes and fabrics, he assumed it was just another womanly hobby, beneath his notice. Then came the drought. It started in the 6th year after Zainab's birth. The rains that should have come in April never arrived. May passed. June. The earth cracked like broken pottery, and the yam seedlings withered in the fields. Farmers watched in horror as their crops died, their wealth literally drying up in the sun. Okonkwo, who had always prided himself on his agricultural wisdom, tried everything. He made sacrifices to the rain gods. He consulted the village oracle. He worked from dawn until dusk, trying to save his plants with water carried laboriously from the distant stream. Nothing worked. By the time the rains finally came in late July, it was too late. The yams were lost. Not just Okonkwo's, but those of farmers throughout the region. The great harvest that everyone had depended on was reduced to a handful of small, stunted tubers barely worth eating. For the first time in his adult life, Okonkwo knew fear. Without a harvest to sell, how would he maintain his status? How would he feed his households? He had 2 wives now, and Obioma had given him 2 sons. More mouths to feed, and nothing to feed them with. He went to the other wealthy men in the village, asking to borrow against future harvests. But they were all in the same situation, watching their own fortunes crumble. The merchant who usually bought his yams in bulk shook his head. "I am sorry, Okonkwo. I would help if I could, but I have my own problems. Perhaps your wives can help? Does Amara not do some sort of cloth work?" Okonkwo dismissed the idea immediately. "Women's work cannot sustain a household. I need real solutions." But as weeks turned into months and his resources dwindled, pride became a luxury he could no longer afford. One evening, as the sun set and hunger gnawed at his belly, Okonkwo finally noticed the steady stream of women coming and going from his compound. They would speak briefly with Amara, hand her coins or trade goods, and leave with bundles of beautiful cloth. "What is this?" he demanded, approaching Amara as she folded a newly dyed wrapper. Amara looked up at him with those same emotionless eyes she'd had since Zainab's birth. "I am selling my attire. I have been doing so for 5 years now." 5 years. Okonkwo was stunned. "And you never told me?" "You never asked," Amara said simply. "You were too busy with your yams to notice anything else in your compound." For a moment, Okonkwo felt anger rising in his chest. How dare she keep secrets from him? But then his stomach rumbled, reminding him of his desperate situation. "How much do you make from this cloth business?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Enough," Amara said. She returned to her folding, clearly finished with the conversation. That night, as Okonkwo lay awake on his mat, he could hear Zainab and the other children laughing in Amara's hut. He could smell food cooking, food that he knew Amara had purchased with her own money. His second wife, Obioma, had complained earlier that there was nothing to cook. Yet Amara and her daughter were eating. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The woman he had abandoned, the woman he had treated as less than valuable, had become self-sufficient. While he had been building his fortune on the unstable foundation of a single crop, she had been quietly building something that couldn't be destroyed by drought or flood. And now, in his moment of need, she owed him nothing. The next morning, Okonkwo swallowed his pride and approached Amara again. "I need your help," he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "The harvest has failed. I have no money to buy food for the household. Could you lend me something from your cloth earnings?" Amara looked at him for a long moment. Behind her, Mom and Kechi, who had come to deliver herbs, watched with knowing eyes. "Do you remember," Amara said softly, "when I was in labor with our daughter? Do you remember what you chose over my life and hers?" Okonkwo's face flushed with shame and anger. "That was different. That was years ago." "No," Amara said. "It was not different. It was exactly the same. You are asking me to value you more than you ever valued me. You want me to give freely what you refused to provide when I needed you most." So, you will let your own household starve? Okonkwo challenged. Let your daughter's brothers go hungry out of spite? Amara smiled then, but it was a sad smile. I will never let Zainab go hungry. As for Obioma and your sons, they are your responsibility, not mine. You chose to take a second wife when you could barely show kindness to the first. You chose to have more children to feed your pride. Those choices belong to you. She paused, then added, but I am not cruel like you were, Okonkwo. I will make you an. Okonkwo waited, his heart pounding. He hated being in this position, hated the reversal of power. But he had no choice. I will help feed this household, Amara continued. But there are conditions. First, you will pay Mama Nkechi the 3 baskets of yams you owed her for Zainab's delivery, or the equivalent in current value. You have money saved somewhere, I know you do. Men like you always keep something hidden. Okonkwo wanted to protest, but Mama Nkechi's eyes were on him, and he remembered her words from years ago. The day will come when you will need compassion, and you will find none. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. Second, Amara said, you will apologize to our daughter for ignoring her all these years. You will tell her that she has value, that she is worth more than any crop or any son. This was harder than the first condition. Okonkwo had never apologized to anyone in his life, let alone a child, let alone a girl. And third, Amara finished, you will work for me. My cloth business is growing, and I need someone to help transport materials from the market to deliver finished products to customers in other villages. You will do this work, and I will pay you a fair wage. With that wage, you can feed your second wife and your sons. The silence that followed was deafening. Work for his wife. Take wages from a woman? The shame of it would destroy his reputation in the village. Everyone would know that mighty Okonkwo had fallen so low that he depended on his wife's business. Never, he said. I would rather starve than humiliate myself like that. Amara shrugged. Then starve. But Zainab and I will eat. And Obioma and your sons, well, that is between you and them. She turned and walked away, leaving Okonkwo standing in the compound, his fists clenched in impotent rage. For 3 days, Okonkwo refused Amara's offer. He went to the village chief, asking for a loan. The chief, who remembered how Okonkwo had once refused to contribute to the fund for rebuilding the village shrine, calling it a waste of resources, politely declined. He went to his age-grade mates, the men he had grown up with. They had their own problems. The drought had affected everyone. He even went to the king of the neighboring town, offering to work in his fields. But the king had heard of Okonkwo's pride and arrogance and sent him away, saying, a man who cannot value his own wife cannot be trusted to value my interests. On the 4th day, Obioma, his young second wife, confronted him. She held their youngest son, who was crying from hunger. My father warned me about you, she said, tears streaming down her face. He said you were a man who loved yams more than people. I did not believe him because you were wealthy and I thought wealth meant wisdom. But he was right. You are proud and foolish, and now my children suffer for it. What would you have me do? Okonkwo shouted. Work for my wife like a common servant. Yes. Obioma shouted back. Yes, if that is what it takes to feed your children. There is no shame in honest work, but there is great shame in letting pride destroy your family. Her words struck something deep inside him. Okonkwo looked at his son's small, pinched face, heard his hungry cries, and something finally broke. That evening, he found Amara under the Irako tree, teaching Zainab how to mix dyes. I accept your conditions, he said quietly. Amara looked up, surprised. She had expected him to hold out longer. All of them. All of them. The next morning, Okonkwo walked to Mama Nkechi's hut with a heavy purse. She was sitting outside, grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle. Mama Nkechi, he said, bowing his head in respect, something he had never done before. I have come to pay the debt I owe you for delivering my daughter. It is 5 years late, and for that I am sorry. Mama Nkechi set down her pestle and studied him. The ancestors work slowly, but they work thoroughly. I am pleased to see that you have finally learned that some debts cannot be avoided, no matter how fast you run. She accepted the payment, then added, Your wife is a remarkable woman, Okonkwo. She had every right to turn you away, to let you feel the same abandonment you showed her. But she did not. Remember that. Remember who showed you mercy when you deserved none. Next, Okonkwo went to find Zainab. She was playing near the stream with other children, her laughter bright and clear. When she saw him approaching, her smile faded. She knew her father had no love for her. Zainab, he called. Come here, child. She approached warily, like a small animal unsure if it would be petted or struck. Okonkwo knelt down so he was at her eye level. The children nearby stopped playing, sensing something important was happening. I have been a poor father to you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I was angry that you were not a son, and I blamed you for something that was never your fault. But your mother has taught me, painfully, that value is not determined by gender or by what we produce. You are my daughter, and you are precious. More precious than all the yams I have ever grown, or ever will grow. I am sorry for the years I wasted not knowing you. Zainab stared at him, her small face serious. Do you mean it, Papa? Or are you just saying these words because Mama told you to? Okonkwo felt shame wash over him. Even his 5-year-old daughter could see through him. Both, he admitted. Your mother did tell me to apologize. But now that I am saying the words, I find that they are true. I do mean them. And I hope that one day, you might forgive me and let me try to be the father I should have been from the beginning. Zainab considered this. Then she stepped forward and hugged him, her small arms barely reaching around his neck. I forgive you, Papa, she whispered. Mama says forgiveness is how we free ourselves from heavy things. Okonkwo held his daughter for the first time in her life, and he wept. The other children watched in amazement. The mighty Okonkwo, crying like a woman? The story would spread through the village by evening. And it did. Some people mocked him. Some called him weak. But others, the elders, the women, those who had always known that pride goes before a fall, nodded in approval. It takes a strong man to admit weakness, the chief said when he heard the news. Perhaps Okonkwo is finally becoming wise. True to his word, Okonkwo began working for Amara's cloth business. He rose early to travel to distant markets, purchasing the finest indigo and other dyes. He carried heavy bundles of finished cloth to customers in neighboring villages, making deliveries that his wife could not easily make herself. At first, it was humiliating. Men who had once sought his advice now smirked when they saw him carrying a woman's wares. But Okonkwo kept his head down and did the work. He had made a promise, and he would keep it. Slowly, something unexpected happened. As he traveled and delivered Amara's beautiful cloths, people began to praise him. Your wife is so talented, they would exclaim. You are lucky to have such a skilled artisan in your household. These patterns are unlike anything we have seen before. Your family is blessed. At first, Okonkwo accepted these compliments with embarrassment. But gradually, he began to feel something new. Pride. Yes, but not in himself. Pride in Amara. Pride in what she had built from nothing, with no support from him. He began to see how hard she worked, how she stayed up late perfecting her designs, how she was endlessly patient with customers, how she was teaching other women in the village, so they too could earn their own money. One evening, 6 months after he had begun working for her, he returned from a delivery to find Amara sitting under the irako tree, counting her earnings. We had a good week, he said, sitting beside her, something he had never done before. Yes, she agreed. The chief's wife ordered 10 cloths for her daughters. That is our largest order yet. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Okonkwo said, I was wrong about you. About so many things. I thought strength meant never needing anyone. I thought wealth was measured only in land and crops. But you have taught me that real wealth is in what you build with your own hands, and real strength is in being able to survive even when those who should protect you fail. Amara looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years. I do not know if I can ever love you again the way I did when we were young, she said honestly. You broke something in me that day you chose yams over your own child. But I think, perhaps, we can build something new. Not love, maybe, but respect. Partnership. I will take whatever you are willing to give, Okonkwo said. I know I do not deserve even that. The drought eventually ended. The rains returned, and the next harvest was plentiful. Okonkwo's yam fields produced again, though not as bountifully as before. He had sold some of his land to pay debts during the hard times. But he was not unhappy. He had learned to diversify, to not put all his faith in a single crop. He had learned that a household built on the labor and dignity of all its members was stronger than one built on the pride of a single man. And he had learned that the person you abandon in their moment of need may one day be the only person who can save you and yours. Years later, when Zainab grew into a beautiful and intelligent young woman, she would tell her own children the story of how their grandfather learned humility. Your grandfather was once a proud and foolish man, she would say. But your grandmother was wise and patient. She could have taken revenge. She could have let him starve. Instead, she offered him a chance to change, to become better. And he took that chance. That is why I tell you, never mistake kindness for weakness, and never let pride blind you to what truly matters. The ancestors are always watching, and the earth always balances its accounts. As for Mama Nkechi, she lived to be 93 years old, delivering babies and dispensing wisdom until her last day. And whenever young couples came to her with their troubles, she would tell them about Okonkwo and Amara. Remember, she would say, that what you sow in cruelty, you will reap in desperation. But if you are wise enough to learn from your mistakes, even the bitterest harvest can be transformed into something good. And the ancestors, listening from beyond the veil, would nod in satisfaction. Another lesson taught. Another soul refined by fire. Another story added to the eternal tapestry of human wisdom.